Good morning and welcome to Plain Speaking, a democratic approach to what's happening and, unfortunately, what's not happening in politics and in this great country of ours. I'm Frank Rosenhoover, your moderator, and to my immediate left is Gillian Kratzer, hopefully the next chair of this Blair County Democratic Committee. And to my over here is George Thompson, our treasurer and research component of great magnitude. And to my extreme left, in more ways than one, is my dear friend Tom Patterson, who has been a faithful member of this panel, and we are here today to talk about some very significant issues. I think the one thing we will all be talking about in some tangential manner, if not directly, and that is how important it is you get out and vote. I know we don't have any local campaigns on the Democratic side, but that doesn't mean you can't support the statewide candidates. There are 4 running for governor, 5 running for lieutenant governor, and if you need information, get on the internet, get on the Blair County Dem website, get on our Facebook account. Gillian and Tom have done a fantastic job keeping you up posted and everything that's happening, and we have a great opportunity this year to unseat a sitting governor. It will be the first time, I think, ever since the two-term came into being in 1974 with Milton Chapp. So please help us choose the governor and help us choose the lieutenant governor. The bigger turnout we have here, the more we help those statewide candidates. So if you have a special candidate you like, don't sit home and say, well, I hope he wins. Get out. I read in the paper today that President Obama is saying that Democrats seem to have a congenital disease called not voting except in the presidential election years, which is unfortunate. So please, let's prove our president incorrect on that statement. Get out and vote. Next Tuesday, our Democratic office will be open from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. If you need a ride, give us a buzz. Come on in and commiserate with us. But anyway, enough of that. We're going to be talking about the governor's race. And so rather than having me say too much about that, George, we'll let you start. And what's your take on the governor's race, and where are we on it now?
Well, it certainly generated a lot of interest for people that do pay attention to politics like I do. I'm not sure how many other people are out there that watch the debates, but they were certainly lively debates. Yes. And I've watched them from the beginning when Tom Wolf was not the target. Towards the end, since he's so far ahead in the polls, everyone seems to be picking on Tom Wolf, trying to embarrass him. And I'm not sure if that has been successful. In fact, I think, according to the polls, it's actually
seems to have had the opposite
backfired.
Effect. Yeah.
Right.
People are not happy about it. People don't like mudslinging campaigns, and I think maybe even more in primaries than in the general, because I think you'll find a lot of people that I've talked to have said, what's going to happen when somebody wins the primary? Is everybody going to, shake hands and make up? And how are they going to do that given the amount of mudslinging that has gone on in the last couple weeks?
Now, if you watch the debates, Tom Wolf handled the criticisms quite aptly. I think he is, for someone who hasn't really run for politics before, he certainly managed to create an image of himself and to not respond to the negativism that's been thrown his way. And I might add, I don't know how many people are getting these postcards, but even Tom Corbett seems to think that Tom Wolf's going to be his candidate. He's sending out mailers accusing Tom Wolf and running ads on TV accusing Tom Wolf of different things that are very dubiously true. I mean, I was just amazing, like the Corbett ads acting like Tom Wolf was responsible for taxes going up. If you go into factcheck.org and investigate, through their research what actually happened, I mean, it's total misinformation that is being put out. I personally am tired of everyone just saying at the best half-truth And this includes everyone. I'm not just restricting it to Tom Corbett. I mean, actually, Allison Schwartz and Rob McCord also has, exaggerated things in Tom Wolf's.
Yeah, there was the claim that, the argument that his company had gone from a pension plan to a 401k, but what was not mentioned in the attack was that when that happened, Tom Wolf had sold his company, 2006-ish, and at that point he had used a pension plan, and during the lapse he bought his company back in around 2009, and during that lapse when he wasn't there, the company moved to a 401k. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, I can't say why he didn't switch back. I mean, I understand.
Well,
I'm sure it would be complicated.
We have to understand, though, that is the way. There's less than 10% of the companies in this country today have the defined benefit plan.
Absolutely.
20, 30, 40 years ago, 60%. So we have to understand the reality of life. The defined benefit plan is dead and is going to die a slow, painful death, but we have to understand that. And one of the main reasons, if we remember, is that the governmental agencies that are funding these things refuse to fund them.
Yeah.
And what happened over a period of years, like with the Blair County, where the Blair County Commissioners even admitting publicly that they deliberately underfunded. Now, to me, that's mismal and nonfeasance of office when you deliberately know what's your obligation. So the thing is, and I feel badly about the demise of the defined benefit plan, but I'm not supporting Wolf's move to that. But what I'm saying...
And just so for the record, he's not supporting it either.
No, it wasn't his move.
In his own information, he says that he wants to continue the defined benefit
for the employees
program. He doesn't want state employees to go to 401k type plan.
Right.
Tom, you had a comment,
myself, the last industry I worked in, when I first started there, it was a defined benefit pension plan. They changed companies. First thing that happened, they went to a 401k. The defined pension was done. And like you said, that's just the way it is.
And that's kind of a disdain for the employees. And the thing is, if, George mentioned the fact that these folks are sticking their nose into our democratic politics, the governor sending out the Republican Party. And can you imagine the chutzpah of Senator Eichelberger? And listen to this statement. He's sticking his nose in, wanting to say that he got the endorsement from both parties. His statement that he has proven to be one of the most courageous, consistent leaders for changing the way government serves the people. What a bold-faced lie. He's opposed to unions. He's opposed to the defined benefit plan. He's opposed to everything that serves the people, and how dare he?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel like that what he must have meant to say was that he's a proven leader in making sure that the government doesn't serve
function,
the people.
Yeah. Tom, what do you think about
ridiculous.
that?
Well, unfortunately, the only mailers I ever get from Bud Schuster. I never got any of those to say so. But you're right. I mean, if you just go beyond what's being said, if you just read the facts behind it, most of what these politicians are saying are nothing but lies, plain and simple.
Well, this accusation that Corbett makes on television ads about Tom Wolf raising taxes, he was the Secretary of Revenue. He had nothing to do with raising taxes. Just in case the audience doesn't understand, the only ones with power to raise taxes in both the state and the federal government are the legislature. And Tom Wolf as Secretary of Revenue certainly can't do anything. No. And in fact, in the testimony that they're referencing to make this claim, he actually was trying to get a decrease in property taxes for Governor Rendell, and by suggesting that perhaps to offset the loss of revenue and property tax decreases, that we might increase the sales tax as a way to offset. That is what that basis of that ad's accusations are from. But total misinformation. Who is even the Secretary of Revenue under Corbett right now?
Well,
no one knows who the guy is. I mean, this is ridiculous.
I have said for many years that this kind of talk from the Republicans for the Grand Obstruction Party, that's what GOP stands for, and they are the 3 R's of that Grand Obstruction Party are reckless Republican rhetoric. And that's what this is. They are lies. They are bold-faced lies. How can you face yourself in the mirror in the morning? How can Corbett and Eichelberger and these people do that?
Well, of course, we know they're the protector of no taxes. That is the only thing that they keep claiming. Now, they forget to mention there are also a lot of anger about all the deficits that government has rung up. Well, guess what? You got to make a choice. If you don't want to raise taxes and you don't want deficits, then you have to reduce programs. And I don't think anyone is really talking about what that actually means, especially at the federal level, but also at Pennsylvania level. The big money items are education in Pennsylvania. If you're seriously not wanting to raise taxes and you don't want deficits, you're going to have to cut education, which actually is what Corbett has done, except for this election year. And even there, he never really went back to funding the way it was in 2008.
Well, and you know what's interesting, George, is Corbett went to talk at high school. I think he's been to several to tout his brand new spending on education. And there were several students who were supposedly threatened with suspension if they'd planned to protest. And they were told that they couldn't. And one of the students said, and rather astutely, I think, that you can't take $1 billion from education and then turn around and say, look, but I gave you $10. And that's what we're talking about here. Just this immediate turnaround and we'll give a little bit to education and that's going to be okay. It's not.
And reducing funding for universities.
Yeah.
And of course now we're reading about student debt being larger than credit card debt in
what's
America.
The Republican answer to that? Oh, we're giving out too many student loans. Really?
Yeah, I mean, people have to understand really what's going on. I mean, there's important programs that the government does, and I don't know, maybe they disagree, the people in the Tea Party, which seem to be at the vanguard of this effort to reduce government expenditures, they seem to be on the elderly side of the general population. Do these people understand that one of the biggest government programs is Social Security, Medicare,
right?
Funding for nursing homes, which a lot of people never think they would go on medical assistance. Hey, in fact, different lawyers advise people in the part of their elder care practice to dispose of their assets so they can hit the taxpayers with nursing home charges.
And why don't the thing that is so incredible is why wouldn't the people 65 and older understand that to support the Tea Party and to support the Republicans is cutting their own chance of living a decent life once they've retired and they're living? I don't understand it. What drives them?
Well, I guess they just don't believe it. I guess it's going to have to happen for people to understand that they do benefit from these government programs. To me, it's so obvious that so much of what the government does is helpful. But hey, they keep winning elections on the basis there's no new taxes. Don't hear a lot about what the programs are going to be cut.
And they keep cutting it. And the ones they're cutting are hurting the people who can least afford it. Even raising the sales tax. And they want to expand.
Well, raising the sales tax disproportionately affects, lower income people.
And then they want to include clothing and some of the other non-essentials that were not covered before. Yeah. I mean, where are we going? Or do we have to have people die in the streets before the obstructionists on the other side understand how heinous and hideous their behavior is? I mean, I don't understand it. Honest to gosh, I don't.
I don't either.
But the only two things they're interested in is preserving their own personal tax rates and corporate tax rates to keep them as low as possible. That's their only goal.
And the people don't seem to understand that most of the people aren't going to get an increase in taxes anyway. When we're talking about increase in taxes, the ones that are really benefiting from the way the tax laws are written are people that are wealthy beyond what most people locally earn. And somehow they keep, when they talk about no new taxes, think this applies to them. And really, they're missing the big picture.
Well, there was another blurb on yesterday I saw. 93% of all of the wealth that was generated in 2010 went to the top 10%. 93% of all the profits and all of the income that was generated goes to the top 10%.
Right here in Pennsylvania, we're actually going the opposite. They've exempted family farms from any estate tax. They've exempted businesses that are family held from any tax. And talk about disparity of income, this is how it happens. You have a certain group of people that have extraordinarily proportion of the income, and then they don't even, when they die, get taxed. This keeps accumulating, this effect. And the wealthy people, they keep getting wealthier. You wonder how in the past hundreds of years, you ended up with monarchies and things. Well, you're seeing it live right now. It might take a while, but you're going to have such an accumulation of wealth, them controlling the way the politics are, never getting impacted because they can control the vote by giving so much money. It's happening right now.
Yes. And I know this wasn't on our list. Let me throw it out because just today 2 things happened. I read the paper. Anybody else read the Ultimate Mirror today? There was a big editorial. And the main editorial in the Mirror, UPMC has got to be careful on this expanding its parking for a couple of reasons. But one of the big reasons is for every house they buy and tear down, no more taxes. And they're expanding beyond belief.
True.
And so we're talking, here are the R's sitting back and saying, what the heck, that's a big corporation, they need those parking spaces. But what about
it's not
the
a big
Altoona?
corporation, though. It's a big non-profit organization.
Part of it is, there were 2 sections to it. I remember reading that paper.
Yeah.
One of them, there was a doctor from Pittsburgh who had big editorial in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette a week ago Sunday. He probably was fired by now. But the fact is, here's Altoona, who's crying for money, and they're letting them tear down all these homes, and there goes the taxes. And the second thing, did you see today? The city wants to lease our water authority now.
Yeah, I didn't read the article. I saw the headline.
And then when you get a chance, read it, because it sounds like nirvana to me. And whenever a thing sounds too good to be true,
probably is.
It is too good to be true. Okay, what are we going to hit next? Because we've hit the governor, we've hit the inappropriateness of these Republicans sticking their noses into.
You know what, Frank? Something we should maybe hit quickly, and I thought of it when George mentioned, people sort of buying up all of our freedoms, is that today the Congress is going to be talking with the FCC about net neutrality regulations.
Yep,
and this is an issue. It's a huge issue. I mean, the internet is kind of the last bastion of really true freedom for people, and what they're proposing is creating essentially a slow lane and a fast lane. Your Verizons and your Comcasts, they'll be able to charge businesses money to make their websites go faster. And so, who can pay for that? Amazon can pay for it, Facebook can pay for it. The big guys can pay for it, but the little guys, they can't. And, this is a way that people have their voices heard. People who have no power have power. And amazing things have happened on the internet that wouldn't absolutely not have happened without it. And the FCC is proposing these rules, and the head of the FCC, used to work for one of these big companies. And it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, the fear is, of course, that once they start charging different rates, that they can actually boycott someone whose viewpoints they disagree with by charging such a large amount of money, and especially new startups that don't have a reserve of money, that their voice will just disappear without people even knowing it existed because they just can't afford to get on.
Well, if there's any information, you can go to Bernie Sanders' website.
Absolutely.
In fact, he has a place on there that you can submit your name and address and send comments to the FCC.
Yeah, now I have a personal, not unanimous agreement that this is wrong, because one of the things that's happening is some of the movie Netflix type of companies, they're using up so much bandwidth that it's forcing the Verizons of the world, the Comcasts of the world, Atlantic Broadbands of the world, to build up their network. So there's not a lot of buffering when you download things.
They should be building up their network, George, because here's why. Let me tell you what. The United States invented the internet, and among industrialized nations, we have some of the slowest download speeds.
Way down the list.
I mean, if you go to Europe, they have fast wireless internet everywhere. Public parks, you name it. It's all over the place. It's fast, it's free, it's better than what we've got by a mile, because they've invested in the infrastructure. They've, put the money into making the technology really work for them in a way that we're not getting, because these private companies, who are making, by the way, obscene amounts of money,
yes,
are not investing.
Well, there was also, as part of that argument, the FCC is considering now expanding the streaming of things like Netflix and Roku, Koku, Dufu, whatever some of those other things are, and then they're going to be able to charge the carriers like Atlantic Broadband and Comcast and all these people much more money, because they're streaming more of them, and what it's going to do is impact the people who buy the service. But I don't see why it is so expensive to expand the capabilities to reach the European and Asian capabilities. It's just...
Well, I know, I have Atlantic Broadband myself, and you get all these choices and channels. I don't know, like a few hundred or something. And I watch very few of them, actually. So as far as I'm concerned, if they're running out of bandwidth, they can eliminate a bunch of the channels that I don't begin to watch. But
they should probably find out the most, say maybe the top 100. But when you get on that thing, you see 400 channels.
Well, people have pushed the FCC some years ago for a la carte programming. Why should I go to DirecTV or Dish Network or Land Broadband? Why should I pay for 500 channels when there's 15 I watch? Because some of them they're getting for free. Fox News is one of them.
Yeah, well, I never watched ESPN myself. No. I guess I'm just not interested in sports, but yet I got a surcharge because ESPN charged Atlantic Broadband, the internet service providers, extra money for the privilege of carrying their programming.
Yeah, well, look like with the Big Ten network and the NFL network, certain times you can't get certain playoffs or certain games because you have to pay an extra fee. And that broadband should be as wide as it's necessary to provide the service without this additional.
But Jill, one of the things that Gillian brought up is really this problem we have here in the United States, that government shouldn't be involved in anything because they can't do anything. Actually, what Gillian is talking about, and in South Korea I know it also applies, the government has a bigger role, first of all, in permitting like municipalities to furnish Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
Philadelphia tried that, and they ended up being forbidden to provide access to anyone in the city. Those were the companies that earned money off of this, saying, hey, wait once, if Philadelphia just does this, we can't charge for it. Everyone's going to have internet access. And in other countries, that's done. And some of the speed is promoted by the countries.
The speed is way better. And I mean, if you look at, in rural United States, people are still just getting high-speed internet. I mean,
how about cell phone service in these places? What in the United States, we're supposed to be the most advanced technological country in the world, which I don't think is true because of things you bring up. But why are we not? Because it's controlled by the people. Just like, and when you talk about governments in other countries provide services, we're the only industrialized country that does not have government-funded full family health care. And they have been doing it for years. And why are we not? We might have a good health care system, not the best by far, but we have the most expensive. See, people who keep condemning government, I mean, it's like telling little kids, the nighttime is for the boogeyman to come out, They'll never see a boogeyman, but they're always afraid the boogeyman's going. That's what these people do with government. The Tea Party boogeyman, government. The Republican boogeyman is the people who need help.
Yeah.
Oh, enough punch. But that's the tragedy, folks, when you're looking at who is interested in serving you, not a guy here who has to send out a brochure to Democrats, and he would just as soon as turn his head when he sees a Democrat, and now he's asking you to vote for him, to go into that machine and put his name in there. Now, fortunately, it's so long that maybe they'll get fatigued and they won't go through the whole thing. But we're telling Democrats, don't a single one of you vote for John Eichelberger on the Democratic side. That man is no friend of the average people that he purports to be. Okay. what do we have next here? So we get.
Well, do you want to talk about our 9th Congressional District?
Absolutely, you guys got to that. You guys went to that debate, so-called debate.
Well, no, actually, I didn't go. Gillian went.
I would have been. They think I'm rabid now. I mean, I would have probably. They'd have probably had to restrain me.
It was. It was a special hour of my life. Let me tell you. The questions I thought were very good questions. There were 6 questions total. The Republican primary candidates in the U.S. 9th are, of course, Bill Shuster, our incumbent, Art Halverson, and Travis Schooley. Now, the odds are that Bill Shuster will be able to pull this out. If he had just been running against Art Halverson, he might have been worried, but I think that Halverson and Schooley are going to split the remainder. But I have to say, Bill Shuster handled himself the best by far, and I'm not a fan of complimenting Bill Shuster, but he, it was an interesting night. The things that were said, they were asked about student loans. People have an average of $25,000 in student loan debts, college students, and there's something like $1 trillion in combined student loan debt in the United States. And, what are we going to do about that? Well, all 3 of them said, we need to get the economy going. We're going to wave a wand, apparently, and just get the economy going. They didn't say how. And they also said unanimously that maybe we're giving out too many student loans. Art Halverson thinks that people are just taking out federal student loans willy-nilly and living on them, which is, I don't think that he understands how federal student loans work, if that is what he thinks. But yeah, I mean, really, we're giving out too many student loans. Maybe everybody doesn't have to go to college. Really. Who's that going to affect? I think we all know.
Absolutely. And the sad thing about it, as you said earlier, student loans have overtaken even credit card loans as far as how much debt. There was another blurb on TV just recently that the federal government, our federal government, earned in interest on the backs of these poor college kids paying $170 billion of interest. Now, to me, that's criminal.
It absolutely is.
I have a grand niece who is dealing with this issue of multiple thousands of dollars in debt. And at the rate that she can afford to pay them off, it'll be many, 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 many years into her more mature years before it's over. Why doesn't the government cut the rate? Now, I don't know what it is now. It was a one time approaching 8%. Why couldn't they just make it a 2%?
They don't want to, is the simple answer. I mean it is pretty ridiculous, and it's absolutely having an effect on our economy, and it will continue to have an effect on our economy. Young families, are not able to do things like buy a home because they've got this debt that's just weighing them down. And if you want to get a high-paying job now, a job that's going to allow you to buy a home, you almost have to have a college degree at this point. It's difficult to get by without one.
And then for Halverson to say that we're giving too many student loans out, what does he want?
Yeah, there's been an increase in young people after they get their education, they move back with family.
Yeah.
They just can't afford to independently live because of all the debt they've accumulated, and also the reduction in jobs, good-paying jobs that they used to formerly get out of college. They're not there. Now, I hope that
they're there for Bill Shuster's son. He made sure to point out.
No,
let's talk a little bit about advertising. I mean, talk about Bill Shuster using the massive amounts of money he has to sort of try to ruin Halverson's reputation, and it's based on, half-truths again. And why does Bill Shuster feel he needs to do that? It would have been nice to actually have a discussion about issues on that side of...
Because he is guilty, George, of all the charges we filed against him. And there's an old adage in life that when you don't have a plausible defense for an argument before you, you denigrate, insult, and lie. And that's what they do. Bill Shuster has no credibility. I'm sorry that the people didn't ask did you vote to cut the chip program? No, he done chips in Pennsylvania, but the food stamp program.
Yes.
And that's something that man should be ashamed of. And why would he vote against Obamacare
50 times?
50 times.
And be proud of it when the people whom he represents, thousands of them, are in dire need of health care, and he proudly stands up there and say, I voted against your health.
And not only that, he proudly, voted 50 times against the Affordable Care Act, but Art Halverson thinks that wasn't enough.
Yeah. How about minimum wage? Yeah. They voted against. Schuster's voted against minimum wage every time.
Oh, they were all against minimum wage. We had a question about the minimum wage. Art Halverson called it reimbursement.
What about the government pension he's getting now for having served in the Coast Guard? Defined benefit plan, living high in the hog, captain's retirement pay. Mm-hmm. Hey, he's not hurting.
No, he certainly isn't.
But see, they lose track of reality.
Well, and the voters are terrible, apparently, at sorting all this stuff out.
They don't take the time, George.
Yeah. Well, and this Obamacare, I think he stopped running these ads about 50 times, or am I don't watch the TV that much.
No, I haven't seen.
See, there's been a shift now in Obamacare. That's been a Republican talking point for a while. Everyone hit Obamacare. The polling is bad on Obamacare, and I understand now that it's actually getting implemented that the opinions are still negative, but
in Kentucky,
changing.
They've found that they call it by a specific state-based name in Kentucky, but when they call it by that name, people love it.
People love it.
People like the program. They don't, they associate it with the president, and then suddenly it goes downhill.
How about Massachusetts? Mitt Romney's plan. They are now buying into the Obamacare Medicaid part of it now. Mm-hmm. It's going to better serve the citizens of Massachusetts.
Well, even let's talk a little bit about Corbett's refusal to accept that Medicaid expansion again. I don't get that either. And in national news, governors that don't accept this Medicaid expansion, they're being roundly criticized nationally for being fools.
Yeah.
And not accepting federal money.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
And in Pennsylvania, supposedly $500 million a year.
Minimum.
That's what Governor Corbett has rejected.
We're paying double. We're paying the federal government to cover that, and we're paying the state to pick it up. Now, we're going to take our first break, and the only break, but we certainly will come back with some very truthful and sometimes very pointed arguments as to why we are the party of the people.
Yeah, I printed out your blog.
Oh, did you?
Do you want to bring up, Bill Schuster at all?
Baby girl, a precious baby girl. When Jamie was a teenager, she would spend her lunch hours going to the tanning salons. I didn't realize how dangerous they were. If you tan when you're young, your risks for melanoma are increased by 75%. That's huge. What I would say to mothers that allow their daughters to tan, no mother should have to visit their daughter in a cemetery. 1 person an hour dies from melanoma. Jamie's hour was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, March 16th, 2007. I hope no one else has to mark their hour.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Savings Man here with a story for you about 2 young spenders named Tommy and Sue. Their parents let them buy whatever they chose, like video games and designer clothes. As they grew older, they spent all their pay on fancy cars, houses, 2 lattes a day. They lived in the moment, never saving a dime. When they tried to retire, they'd run out of time. Working forever is Tom and Sue's fate, so choose to save now before it's too late. Visit our website to find out more, because a happy ending's worth saving for.
Foreign policy.
Foreign policy. Okay, here we are back again, folks. We are trying to condense some of these topics because, believe me, we have enough information to keep you interested and engaged for a long time. However, we're going to be talking about a couple other issues, but George wants to just, while we get off of the Schuster shenanigans. George wants to mention a little bit about...
Well, I just wanted to point out how much money Schuster has available, and this is a little outdated. I ran this off 2-3 weeks ago. He has available to him $2.8 million compared to Art Halverson's $168,000. I mean, there's no match at all. Bill Schuster could just keep advertising, and if the people, the voters, just look at the advertisement, Bill Schuster clearly would win. But let me just tell you, some of the people getting this money that he's spending when you go in to look at who is actually getting the money that Bill Schuster is spending, there's a prominent company, Red Maverick Media. Bill Schuster has paid them. This is, again, a few weeks old. This was April 18th filings. About $650,000 has gone to this Red Maverick Media company for, advertising, political advice. And just interesting, one of the people involved in this Red Maverick Media is, by coincidence, perhaps Chief of Staff Robert Sims of Bill Schuster's campaign. He quit Bill Schuster as Chief of Staff and went with this company. I just wonder if there's some connection there, all this money going to Red Maverick Media and Bill Sims.
Well, I can see it now. The GOP's motto in each election: buy us, we're for sale.
Yeah, it's a shame, but this is what happens. I mean, elections are being bought, and I don't know how any reasonable person looking at what's going on can't conclude that the elections are being bought. And unfortunately, we've talked about this before, anonymous PACs are sponsoring these ads. They're officially like non-profit charities, and they don't need to say who's giving them the money.
Like
So effectively, the Tea Party's one of them. So effectively, these organizations that are putting up these ads, oftentimes you have no idea who's funding them. Well, voters, maybe you should start worrying about this.
Gillian, you wanted to talk a little bit about foreign policy.
Oh, well, one of the questions that got asked at the debate was regarding foreign policy, specifically, we have several proto-conflicts that are about to happen or happening right now. Ukraine is an issue. And so the candidates were asked what they wanted to do about those things. Halverson and Schuster were both very, very on the hawkish side of things. They want to, go in there and show everybody that America's got big guns. But something that Bill Schuster said that I think the entire audience reacted to was, he said that, China is spending 3 times more on their military than the United States. And then there was a pause. And he said, by GDP. Which, I mean, come on.
Outrageous
The United
lie.
States spends more on our military than the next 15 countries below us combined.
Including China and Russia and all the rest
Absolutely.
of them. What a bold-faced lie. See, that's the lie part of it.
Well, the scary thing is maybe he believed it. I don't know. Do you think?
I hope not. By the way, he corrected himself and said by GDP. I'm sure that he knows
But
that's
that
not
doesn't
correct.
even make sense what his correction was. What does that mean? GDP?
Speaking of foreign policy hawks and that, John McCain has already said we should send troops to Ukraine and all that. The latest one to jump on the bandwagon is Condoleezza Rice. She was on Politico this morning saying that we ought to send troops out there and that'll stop Putin in his tracks. Now McCain wants to send troops into Nigeria to look for the girls that were kidnapped. That's a heinous thing.
Yeah.
But what are we going to...
Well, what taxes are they planning to raise to pay for this? None of this is free.
Hey, we'll take more money out of
Social
food stamps,
Security or food stamps. I mean, this conversation really needs to start being that way.
Well, see, not until the people have their voices heard, and I don't know if you guys saw the program, part of one of these programs about what impact does a citizen have on how the legislators vote. Did you see that statistic? When they did a survey of when they talked to legislators about what is the most important factor in you voting for certain bills and do your constituents, the constituents have zero impact on the legislators. Every decision they make is based upon the people who contribute to their campaigns. Now that is the antithesis of what democracy is about. But this was a respected Pew organization, and they're saying that of the extensive interviewing they did, we individually and as a group of people have no impact. Now isn't that criminal?
Well, it is criminal, but it is understandable.
Buy me, I'm for sale.
Yeah, it's...
Tom?
Well, even a program we did some time ago, people are too accepting of government. They're now accepting the fact that they can't do anything with government, so they go, oh, well. And these political ads that Schuster and the rest of them are running are saying the same thing. They talk about people. Now he has people on there saying how great he is and how wonderful he is and what he's going to do. Well, that's fine, but I haven't heard one statement out of any of these politicians running or rerunning as to what I'm going to do my next term to make things better.
Well, Bill Schuster apparently believes in pollution.
Yeah.
One of the ads he's running about the coal plant. I know it's popular. You get a lot of money. The coal companies are willing to pay that you don't touch their right to pollute.
Yeah.
But let's say it the way it is. That's what's going on, the right to pollute.
Yeah.
And of course, some of the courts now have entered into this, and the eastern coast states, they're getting tired of Ohio and Pennsylvania sending all the pollution over to them, and they've actually won a court case.
Supreme Court.
It went to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
I think really, I hate to say it because coal, I understand, it is a big factor traditionally in our economy, but the world is turning away from that, and we better soon adjust to reality. You had these two environmental climate studies released recently. That talks more about global warming, but the clean air, of course, impacts right now your health, whether you can get the pollutants out of the air. And these things are just ignored by local politicians. They keep running, keep burning, don't worry about pollution. And that's because coal companies are given the money
I was going to say, coal support Schuster.
That's right. Yeah. But the thing is, as the president pointed out in several times he's spoken, all of the leading economists, not just environmentalists, but the leading economists are saying, don't invest in a coal plant, a regeneration plant and all that, because it is so vitally expensive compared to natural gas. And it's destroying the whole environment. And like George says, we won that case at the Supreme Court, but we can't even belch our filthy air into another state.
Well, it was interesting. Now, I read an article in Forbes. I didn't print it out to bring it, but they were talking about the Clean Air Act, about what happened in the Senate. And Forbes said they couldn't find any statistical evidence that coal's bad. Now, there's a magazine that is pro-business. But I just found it funny that he just did the whole denouncement of climate change.
Well, you mentioned that bill about, and this is so ironic. The House of Representatives passed the Clean Air Act and sent it to the Senate. And here's this yahoo Scott Brown, who's running for Senate in New Hampshire. He called his friends in the Senate. They threatened to filibuster, and when the cloture vote came up on this clean air bill, which the House, which is totally Republican, and I was surprised they passed it.
Yeah.
They voted 55-32 against the bill. Now,
well, the reason they passed it is actually not called clean air. It's called the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act. But actually there was a consensus, and this legislation had been in the works for about 2-3 years.
Yeah.
It's garnered the support of the Chamber of Commerce. It's been introduced by Jeanne Shaheen, which would be the angle of the Democratic senator from New Hampshire,
right?
Whom
he's going to run against is Scott Brown,
right? Scott Brown's opponent, so to speak, and it was co-sponsored by Rob Portman, who's in Ohio.
Yeah.
Isn't he? Where is he? Well, in any case, he's a Republican.
Co-sponsor the bill.
And they've made efforts to gather in consensus on this bill because it's really what the bill is saying. They want to encourage energy efficiency in building construction. I mean, that was the focus of the bill. And, I mean, in a way, who can argue against this? Had come up with standards for energy efficiency.
Somebody who's running for office and is opposed to...
Well, yeah, everything becomes a partisan issue. And, the Republicans, in the end, they thought they had this where everyone would pass it in the Senate.
Yeah.
And in the end, Republicans wanted to throw on the Keystone XL pipeline. And they also, which actually Senator Reid had agreed to allow a separate vote on the Keystone pipeline. I'm not sure that's relevant, though, because I think at this point, isn't it with President Obama and the Department of State, John Kerry?
Yeah, but they're waiting for, it's all a political thing. But here Reid was willing to put himself in the line again and for this whole thing. And yet the Republicans bowed to this reckless Republican reasoning.
Yeah, and the only thing that Senator Reid wouldn't agree to allow his amendment was opposing the EPA regulations that actually have already been passed. I mean, these regulations have been passed years ago, and really what's going on is President Obama, because you can't get anything out of Congress anymore, he just decided to interpret the already passed legislation and start putting his own regulations in effect. Not really his own. The authority was given in the EPA original legislation.
Well, did you guys listen to and this was quite some time ago, Boehner was being interviewed about the lack of new bills and everything in the House, and he said in front of the national television, we are not elected to pass new bills. We are elected to overturn existing bills. That's what the man said, the leader of the House of Representatives.
And this is why we don't get anything done. I mean, there's this faction of, people that think that the government can't get anything right. And then in order to prove that, they run for office and make sure that the government can't get anything right. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And, the government can do good things when people run for office that actually want to do good things and that work together on things.
Yeah, you got to want to. It's a sad, sad day to see this total obstructionism. And wait till you see one of our big new signs. We're getting a new one, and it's the truth. I mean, it is incredible. One thing I wanted to bring up before we forget, anything else on the foreign policy, because for Condoleezza Rice to jump in there now is just so, that war criminal.
Well, I have to say I agree with President Obama's reluctance to get involved in all of this hatred that's throughout the world. I mean, why should we? Why are these people been killing each other for a long time, and how are we supposed to prevent it?
You can't. It's a culture too. You go to the Middle East, they talk about democracy and Christianity. One of the Republican idiots said our goal is to Christianize the Middle East. That is stupid reasoning. I mean, you don't overturn cultures.
That's exactly how Al-Qaeda gets its start. Statements like that.
Yeah. Okay, we're down to 10 minutes, and we ought to start looking at these things now. How about on the county level? The big issue of reassessment. What do we think about that? Tom, do you have any thoughts about this reassessment? Is it going to succeed? Is it going to impact?
Well, like I told George, I said, when you look for actual figures, it's really hard to find any real source of information when it comes to city or county information. But what they're spending, and George has a piece about the people that are going to do it, but it's going to have impact. Most certainly. I mean, there are a lot of, the average building in Altoona was assessed in 1958. Mine's one of them, But the other things on the other side of the coin, there are a lot of these houses in town that probably aren't even worth what they were assessed at in 1958. I mean, the inner city is in bad shape. And how many properties do we have that are empty or abandoned.
Right.
And, I think when this all washes down, I think the county might find some surprises that they weren't anticipating.
Well, we were told at a recent presentation that the general rule that they're using to sell reassessment, and Gillian, correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I don't think I am, the people who are pushing the reassessment now say that there will be 3 effects. 1/3 of all the properties that are reassessed at the level now and the taxes you're paying will diminish. 1/3 will stay the same, and 1/3 will have their taxes increased. Now, they say that this is based upon having checked with other cities or counties, who have gone through reassessment. Now, there's no guarantee of that because we don't know how many properties in the city. And one question was raised of one of the county commissioners I know not too long ago, well, what about all these properties that are not taxed? And then, of course, they don't want to get into the slippery slope of taking a look at all the properties and who owns them. And, of course, a lot of them are public entities. And the whole thing is, in the city of Altoona, because we're so constricted, we can't expand like other cities because Logan Township is a total circle around us. So Altoona has no expansion rights. So whenever properties are abandoned or sold for parking spaces, it diminishes.
Well, this idea of property tax is very unfavored by the population, and things keep coming up year after year on how to get away from reliance on property taxes. And the truth is, Pennsylvania relies more on property taxes than most other states. And the big cost is within the schools. Unfortunately, the way Pennsylvania has set things up, there's a lot of the property tax money goes to support the schools, as opposed to the state funding what they used to, which is 50% of the cost of the school, and the state's money comes not from property taxes, it comes more from sales tax and income tax.
And this causes this, local taxes funding schools causes a really discriminatory effect in school systems where you have, wealthier areas have more tax revenue.
Montgomery, Bucks, Berks counties.
They have better schools, and areas that don't have the tax revenue don't have the programs that these places have. Because Pennsylvania has the most local governments of any state in the United States. We have people from outside of Pennsylvania think it is absolutely insane, the number of local governments that we have.
Well, we have 14 townships around just in Blair County.
Because, in a lot of places, what they have is a system where, the county is really what it is, and that's where, taxes are handled, and individual municipalities don't really do the taxing the way they do in Pennsylvania. And so what you would have under that sort of a system is where, your Logan townships and Altoona and, everybody sort of throws into the same pot, and the effect is much more balanced, especially as far as school systems go, and we don't have that. And so you have this problem.
Yeah, and actually the disparity in what people spend on schools is one of the problems in trying to get away from real estate taxes, because some school districts, and I don't know Altoona specifically, but they spend double the amount of another school district, and they can do that not because the state is giving them more money necessarily, it's because they have elected on their own to spend more for school districts. They value the education, and so they tax themselves essentially in the way of property taxes. Now, what happens though is if you try to eliminate the property taxes statewide, how is this actually going to work with those school districts that have chosen to spend double what another school district spends? Is it fair to use the income tax to pay a already probably wealthy school district more money than a school district that doesn't charge that much? So there's different problems, I guess, is what I'm saying. Everyone always has a simple remedy. We'll just get rid of property taxes. Sales tax, we've talked about sales tax already sort of hitting the lower income people because they tend to spend all of their money. They can't save it. they need to spend it.
Well, another thing about the inequity in the funding that's given by the government, there is a built-in clause in the law that says every school district will get money, and they say that even the richest ones are guaranteed like a 1 or 2% increase regardless. And that's I mean, to me, that's unreasonable, because you have little school districts like Williamsburg and Claysburg, Kimmel, and like the northern Potter, where they have a total staff of like 21. And Williamsburg, I think their staff is now down around 40 people with about 400 students K through 12. How can they generate the kind of money that would provide multiple language offerings, multiple science offerings, multiple mathematics offerings? You have people down there who would be teaching 4 subjects if you couldn't find people. So there's got to be a statewide effort to try to equalize not only the costs but the offerings, the availability, I think.
Unfortunately, these are the areas that are ripe for the charter schools to move into.
Yeah. And see, that's another thing. They're wasting all that money on charter schools when there's no proof they're doing any better.
They're not doing better, as a matter of fact. And I mean, for-profit education is absolutely a travesty. The main goal of education is to educate children. It should not ever be for profits.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Well, see, that's what Corbett's whole idea is, and I wish we could find that comment.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Corbett has doggedly said, find me a private company that can provide anything that government does, and we will sublet it out. History is bereft of examples where every time you turn a governmental service over to private enterprise, eventually it has driven the taxpayers bankrupt.
Well, going back to the governor's races, I think all 4 of the candidates want to do something about charter schools. Some of them want to look at it.
There's been, even on the Republican side, problems with the way Pennsylvania's implemented it, and Pennsylvania's going big time. Most states have not allowed the growth of cyber charter schools.
Right.
Now there's you need to get your definitions correct, because
and the trouble is those schools and those entities don't have the same rules and regulations that public education has to follow. Certified teachers, mandatory curriculum, mandatory hours of instruction. When you don't have the same playing field, how can a public school compete with a private school who can turn away anybody?
By the way, I want to add, because this goes into this misinformation stuff, how is it possible the Democratic candidates for governor keep talking about the underfunding of the education system, and then Tom Corbett comes out in his ad saying that he's given more money to education? This whole area is ripe for maybe a program. What is the truth
We could do
here?
that because, I got the sign here. We're down to about 50 seconds. It's incredible. Of course, with 4 great minds and sources of knowledge, it's amazing. But, it is truly so constraining, and I wish we had a better opportunity to go further into things. But, folks, please understand that what you're hearing from this August panel, and it's even only May, August, May. But anyway, it is really, truly the truth, and it's for your benefit. The Democratic Party really, truly cares for the average and every citizen. Help us, help you. Vote Democratic. And remember, statewide races are very important. Panel, thanks again, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks after the election, and we appreciate your interest, and vote Democrat.